So today is Monday, October 1st, 2014. This is the tutorial on how to do a tree map with a legend and a key, part based on Chapter 5, Visualizing Proportions, from the book Visualize This by Nathan Yao. Do you have RStudio open? Yeah, just go to Packages on the right. Do you have the right window? And then click on the, yeah. Yeah, I mean, RStudio is really nice because just using R by itself was a little tricky. Okay, so I'm going to keep that file open just as a reference. And I'm just going to go over it briefly, okay, just as a kind of a summary of what we're going to do, okay? So, so once again, a tree map is a kind of pie chart in which, rather than having slices, so rather than being based on angular, it's still an area chart, so you're comparing areas, but another key thing in a pie is the angle, right? That of each particular slice. The trouble with pies is that once you have too many slices, and once some of the slices get too small, they're really hard to compare. So a tree map has this advantage that you can have fairly small pieces within it. Oops, sorry, to get better at the zooming in here. And it allows you to put little bits and still kind of be quite visual. Also, the nice thing is that you can have nested, if you like, pies. So in a regular pie, it would be really hard to then subdivide a big slice into much smaller slice. I mean, it's possible, but it's not as visually clear. So in a tree map, what you have is like nested sets. So in this case, you have cars on the right side here. They're separated by this big white line, which I did in Illustrator later on, or rather, the authors here probably did the same. And on the left, you have trucks. Okay, and there's all kinds of ways that you can slice it and dice it. There's different algorithms that might do all horizontal slices, might try to do all squares, which would be actually quite hard. Or in general, more generally, it's like a rectangle. So you're dividing it up into simple rectangles that try to be fairly random and nicely arranged and not like all going in the same direction. We're going to do also the key and the legend for this color shift. So if we look at the set, the way the data is organized is actually quite straightforward. So you have an ID which may or may not be useful. You have a model name for each box. A percentage change in this case, again, is the change from one year to the next, minus or plus, and how many are sold. And then the category, you see, most of these are trucks and some of them are cars. So this will be one big box, and then the trucks will be the other smaller box. So if you had even yet another, if you wanted to do more nests, you would do it by specifying categories on another possibly column. And then we talked about the unit sold is a monodimensional piece of data. It's just a number, right? So the program has to turn it into an area. So in order to have an area, you have to have a base by the height, right? One dimension by the other dimension. So the program just factorizes these numbers in such a way that when you're done, you get nice rectangles and hopefully no blank spaces. If you notice, there are actually a few blank spaces here which may or may not be actual nothing. I don't know, since they didn't put a label, I have a feeling that the program here just created some empty boxes which would be weird, right? Because then the total would be wrong. So I have a feeling they just couldn't fit the labels for these particular models. And this is actually kind of a default version that we'll produce in our were the colors. And you can see that the color shift is not very, it's not what we want, right? Because here it's starting at 0. And because the average for the year, that year was minus 2.5, the author of the graph, which happens to be Amanda Cox, one of their best designers, decided that that would be the shift to show who was doing better than the average for that year, not just whether it was more or less from the year before, because everybody was doing worse, right? So the whole graph would have been red. Here I'm just showing which of these two. I made a scrap file to create a key that would be proportional, but because here I can just make, remember how we made fake circles for the key for the bubbles? We just added a few columns, right? Well, if we did that here, it would screw up the total, right? Because all of a sudden your total box would be bigger than reality, right? Because you're inserting new numbers. So what I had to do is I made a script file and I tried to duplicate these two squares, which are close to 100,000 and to 50,000, I believe. And here I go through how I did that. In other words, I had to basically rig those two boxes to give me round numbers, right? And but then I had to change some other numbers to make the total stay the same as it was before. So sounds a little complicated, but essentially I wanted some, like, as if some car had sold exactly 100,000 cars for that year, right? Which is impossible. And another model that sold like exactly 50,000. But if that were the case, then the other cars, the value has to change to give me the exact original total number. Anyway, this shows again this is from the New York Times, and which I should mention for the purpose of the video, that this graph was from 2007, right before the car industry pretty much imploded and the government bailed it out, and everybody was doing not so great, but especially truck sales were way down. So we're going to replicate this key and color ramp or color legend. Here I'm just highlighting again what I did for those particular boxes, which I then was going to use as my key. And then you have the code that does a simple tree map without the fancy key and the fancy color. And again, here are the steps. So basically these are my two. This one didn't come out very good, right? That doesn't fit so well. But if I have 100,000, it's easy to do 25,000 because that's just a quarter of that bigger box, right? So don't make a key where this will say, 125,352 cars. That's not the idea, right? You have to make a round number. Otherwise, he's going to start thinking, gee, which one is close to that key, right? And then this was the simple, kind of out-of-the-box color ramp, as Art calls it, or as ArcGIS called it. And but then we're going to change that. So the code to figure out like how to customize those color breaks was actually done by two Gabriels, one Gabriel and one Gabriela. Gabriela is from Brazil and Gabriel is from the United States. They were my TAs a couple of years ago. And this is pretty much out of the box. Now notice that the separations between the two sets, it's not so great, right? I mean, here's the break. The only hint that this is the break for these two rectangles is that fact that this label right here for the category is like in the middle of those rectangles. But otherwise, this is hard to read, right? So that's where we fix it in Illustrator. We're going to look at nice resources like the Color Brewer palette. And this was the final version in Illustrator. Pretty much, identical to the one in the New York Times, I think. The boxes are going to look different because again, who knows what algorithm and what program they used. And then at the end, you have both the simple code with the comments, and you have the the more elaborate code with the custom colors. So let's see. I think all you need is really the code. Should be this one. Yeah. Okay. I'm going to save it, and also I'm going to show you how I got these numbers. Let's see, save as desktop. Any questions, guys? Sorry, it takes a long time to go through this stuff, but and notice that even though the extension is txt text, when you bring it into R, it doesn't really matter, right? Because everything is a text file. It doesn't really matter what the extension is. Let me see if I can show you here under Tools, Web Developer, Page Source. I'm going to do a find, and I'm going to look for, no, not there. Okay, so I must have gotten it. I must have found it in some other link. I think I followed some of these links to maybe where the data set was. Oops. So I think what I'm going to do is also just copy the entire code. That is good stuff, so that we have it. Again, don't cut and paste the whole thing. Well, the PDF is still kind of the best place, so I'm going to try to cut and paste from the PDF and see if that works. When you downloaded the data, it will show up something like this, and you can just do save page as. Does it work? Yeah, you can also, when you are in R, you can say, import data set from URL. That's another. Okay. Let's get started. Very long introduction. Let's see. I'll do it again. So again, import data set, text file. Car sales, open. Okay. And I'll start with the basic code, okay? So I'm just going to cut. You can also cut and paste. I think it's pretty safe if you cut and paste from the browser window. So this is it's called TreeMap Test R, and it's the so-called basic code. New R script. Yeah, this is jumping ahead a little bit, but that's okay. What it's really just doing is before it creates the map, it also tells to put the labels on each box and to concatenate the name of the label, the model, and the number of units sold. Okay, so this is this new variable called field, and it's going to take the model column information and the unit sold information, and it's going to plot it, and it's going to call it, and it's going to paste, which means just like writing together two pieces of information from two different places. So it's going to create, it's going to take the car sales, let's see. Yeah, it's going to take these two, and in between them, it's going to put a separator, which is in this case just a dash and a space. So this separator here is just saying, okay, between these two pieces of information, put a space, a dash, and another space. So I'm going to just try to run that, and I apologize, this is running into something that should be after, but now we'll try to run that, if it works. Okay, that's just creating the variable. So I should probably look at the annotated, but let's just see if it works first. I have to turn on my 3map package if we haven't done it yet. Do I have it?
You also need to turn on our color group.
Oh, right. So thank you. Which I have neither one of those, so I have to install them. Yeah. So that downloads together with 3map, right? Yeah. So install 3map, and when you do that, I guess the install dependencies is I don't know if that has anything to do with it, but once you bring it in, oh, it's still installing. Is it doing it? I guess it's doing it. It's a lot of stuff. Yeah. Okay. Great. Wonderful. So, yeah, make sure you turn on 3map, and then the other one is called R Color Brewer, okay, which is kind of another custom little thing that creates the colors, or rather it has a preset color ramps, color scales. So make sure those are turned on. And now we'll try to run this. Yeah, wow, great. It works. So let's quickly see. So again, in R, it's not, it's not pretty, right? I mean, this separation between the two categories of trucks and cars is not very obvious. And also right now, it actually looks like, well, mostly it's, going in the red, right? Only a few models are going in the green. And if you look at the key, or the legend rather, you can see that the split point is at 0. Now, here's the thing that I can't get over, and I think it's wrong. It's silly to define, a color. In other words, these points should be at the breaking point between each color. Because if we say that something sold between, 0 and 20, well, that's what defines the color. So the color should be, in between the two numbers. So we can fix this in Illustrator, but I personally think that this is not right, the way the labels get put in. Also, what's really weird here is that all of a sudden 0, well, what's 0? There can't be no cars at 0. It's either more or less, right? So by coloring something with this color, it's like saying I'm coloring nothing, right? So the 0 should be at the least in one of these breakpoints. The 0 label, that is. Let's just quickly look at the PDF again to see what the annotations are. Yeah, this is without creating the very fancy, not the fancy, but like custom colors. I'm just going to copy and paste this into, let's paste it in R, because I'm just trying to differentiate between, yeah. Yeah, this just breaks down what, I believe this is the same code we just ran, okay? So what is this called? The parameters, attributes. Each one of these is it's an attribute, but anyway, let's break it down. So TM plot is the command, and you're doing car sales, which how did it? Yeah, carsales is the name of the files, right? So it drops the extension. So the first two lines create the new variable that combines the model name and the unit sold for each model in one single column. In this line here, where you want to say what you want to put between the two pieces of information, you could put anything, and you can even put basic HTML code or code that will create, like, for example, a break. So in this case, we're just going to put a dash. So if you look at the graph here, this is what that variable is doing, right? It's taking this information from one column, this information from another column, and in between them, it's putting in this little piece of information, which is the dash. We could say, we could have said hello world, smile, and it would have written that, right? Because it's a string, because it's between the quotation marks, you can use any character, I believe. So yeah, for example, if you use this thing instead, it would put a break, which would be nice. And in fact, I think that's preferable. This is basically the code for a hard break between the first field and the second field. Okay, so the builds boxes, index equals C, builds boxes are the values in category. Yeah, anything belonging to cars will go into one set. Anything belonging to trucks will go to another set. The unit sold is that number, which is going to be, you could call it squared or factorized, right? And so the size of each rectangle is proportional to the number according to a particular, algorithm. The change is the color, and we'll set the color shift red to green based on the percentage. So obviously less than 0 is red, and more is green. Let's see. In this case, that percentage change, by the way, was something we had to do, right? Because if you go to this website that might have, how many cars are sold, you might need to do a little bit of Excel work in which you say, this is the number from last year, this is the number from this year, what's the percentage change? And there's probably a formula that you can figure out to get that number. So there's a little bit of homework involved in that. Okay, let's see. The value is the numerical value in the change, the percentage change. The range is how far you want that basically to go, and this gives you the scale. Now the palette, in our case, is just a straightforward, it's called red, yellow, green palette, and there's 8 steps in between each there's 8 steps in the total. And it's diverging scale from Color Brewer. We're going to look at that in a moment. The algorithm is pivot size. I don't know what that means exactly, but there are other algorithms like, horizontal slices, squarified, whatnot. And it's sorting by ID, which is the size, and it places the biggest rectangle probably in a corner. So let's just quickly go to the PDF and look at Color Brewer real quick. So Color Brewer is something that some students actually in some university, I think Pennsylvania, devised. And it's pretty nice because you even have like, it was created for maps, and you can pick these sets, and you can even do like colorblind type of sets, for people here, colorblind safe, printer friendly, etc., etc. So people have used these guys, and Mike Bostock did a nice thing where he also posted hexadecimal notation. Let's see, what is it? And also JavaScript. Let me find it here. Maybe I should just do a find. I always forget one can do that. There. Yeah. So these are the scales, and some of these are just one way, and some of them are diverging. So the one that we used in the code is one of these. I think it's this one, I believe. Okay. But again, notice, first of all, there's usually like too many steps. And notice how, because it's an, well, this could be this. I mean, it doesn't have to be not 13. I think there's like 13 or 11 here. But notice how there's one in the middle. And again, you know, if that's 0, that just doesn't make sense to me. So I would say in general, like get rid of white because, you know, white is nothing. And definitely don't use these guys, right? It's like there's no point because you're not going to be able to sort anything based on those. Just use either one scale going one way or a diverging scale going two ways. And usually, you know, conventionals. Red means you're in the red, black or green means you're in the black. Okay, I'll quickly show how I did the key, meaning the key is the one with the boxes, right? And the scale is the one with the colors. I'm just going to go to the clean, what I call the clean scrap version. Let's choose Excel. So, do you have any questions about this? Do you understand? What I'm doing is I'm trying to do the same thing we did with the bubbles in the other tutorial, in which we created a key to show a bubble that's maybe 1,000, a bubble that's 3,000. And to do that, we just created new columns, right? But because the bubbles were kind of just all over the place, it didn't really matter much. But here, if I create additional rows, in other words, additional car models, even though they have fake names, that's going to affect the total because all of a sudden my total rectangle is going to be different and all the proportions are going to be different. So a little bit of homework to do that. And you know, maybe there's a better way, but again, this is what I was able to do. Okay, so this is my Excel. I call it a scratch pad. You know, okay, this one. And you really should have a key, right? I mean, because otherwise it's hard to just look at it. Okay, yeah, this actually explains pretty well. So this was the original data. I'm going to try to do this quick. Okay, this is the original data with all the models, and this was my total, right? About 2 million cars for Chrysler. Okay, now what I did is like, oh, okay, I need some boxes that are about about the size that I want to show, about 100,000 and about. I really wanted 25, but this is close to 50,000, so I'm going to pick these two. So I'm going to modify these 4 rows. I need to modify these two to create 100,000, 50,000. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make up the difference, either plus or minus, by changing those numbers into these 2 other models. Okay? So that my total equals the one as before. Right? So do you see what happened here now? Actually, the other way around, rather. I made this box. I made Dodge Magnum 25,000, and I made Dodge Charger 100,000, but I did a calculation below. You see how these numbers now are different. I had to increase Jeep Liberty, and I had to increase Dodge Durango in order to get the exact same total. And to do that, I just did a few calculations here. So that's really important because otherwise, again, your total box is going to be screwed up, and your key is not going to match your other graph. And so if you look at the new data set, again, this is just to generate the key, you'll see that these numbers are different from the original. Okay. Okay, so this is the new code to create that key. Let's see if it works. I'm just gonna copy. It's all, again, it's in the PDF, the link, and oh, I need to call a new data set, the one that was called car key. You can tell because of these round numbers, right? So let me download that. And now in R, we're going to import that. And all this trouble to do one thing, right? One little key, but it's, you know, what you got to do. Right here, open port. So let's try it again. So now we have this sort of, again, dummy set just to create the key, and we're going to run that and run this, and it looks like it did it. And so these are my two boxes now. Where are they? They actually looks like they're different from the original. Yeah. Oh, see, this is every time is different. It probably depends on the size of the box. But so now these are my two pieces for the 100,000, and this is my box for 25,000. The proportions are different, but we don't care because we're gonna make a box inside that 100,000 to make it look like 25,000. So that's great. So this works. So you keep this, and what probably does not change, and I say probably because you never know, meaning that you should keep your environment like exactly the same. So don't change the windows like I'm doing, so that this rectangle, the shape of this rectangle stays the same. I know this is one spot that R is, I don't know, maybe there is a way to know, to kind of lock it, but I don't know it. Let's do one with the custom colors for the key, okay? And that's just a bit of complex code, but we're going to zoom in, take a quick look, and see how it's doing what it's doing. Okay, the usual things we did before. Now the separator is going to be slightly different. We're going to put a return instead of a dash, so it's going to make it into two lines. And here's how, again, I don't know exactly. This was my TA, who knew R very well. But what this creates here is it's telling exactly where you want the breaks of each little segment, okay? So the first segment is going to be at minus 100%. The second one is going to be at minus 10%. The middle break, or the one where it's going to, let's see, there's still a break in the middle that's 0, and that's going to be interesting to see how it's going to turn out. But notice how there's this minus 2.6, which is, again, the industry average for that year, because everybody was going down. And then up from that is 10, 100, 200. Okay, so that's going to set when the color is going to change. And then where before we had this thing, okay, where before the colors were defined with the kind of ready-made scale, here it's calling up this variable called bucket, right? And then the type is categorical because it's based on that new bucket. Normally this would have been the value, right? The range is from minus 20 to 200, which seems a little strange since we have minus 100 here, but maybe it doesn't matter. And then the palette, and here's where you can make your custom colors, right? So these are hexadecimal values for, greens and reds, and you can type them in within quotation marks, And so it's going to assign each one of these to each one of these break. And actually what I did was I took the ready-made scale, but I got rid of whatever 5 values and only kept 6, and I looked up what they were in hexadecimal, and then the algorithm is the same. Let's see, if you run it and the legend only displays 5 swatches instead of 6, it's because there's no data between 100 and 200. Note that the text of the labels does not match the colors because it's ordering them alphabetically, but color order is correct. Okay, a few little tricks here. Fix it in Illustrator, make the legend horizontal, connected rectangles, not squares. Yeah, just clean it up in general, and you can double check in Photoshop the values, but it should work. So let's try to run that. Hopefully it should run because the data set is already there, but let's try it. So this one creates the 2 fields together, right? For the labels, so we're just going to run that. Okay, no errors, that's good. Oh, actually, I forgot about this. We didn't know how to do this like scale, how to replicate the scale in the assignment. So I was telling the TA, oh, why don't you just like email Amanda Cox? Maybe she will be nice and she'll actually like let us know how she did it. And I sent to my TA without realizing I actually like was copying her because I was looking up her email. So I ended up asking her directly, and she like responded within like, I don't know, 6 hours. She just like sent the answer, said, oh, try this method. And that was really, really nice. So there you go. Sometimes all you have to do is just ask the author. Yeah, that guy that did D3, by the way, if you ever start doing D3, he's amazing. He answers like every question. He's like this kind of superstar. But so anyway, we got no errors, so that's good. So now we're going to create this other thing, which is the separations. Hopefully no errors. That's good. Again, it's all in memory, right? Nothing is happening. And now, if we're lucky, we're going to run the entire... again, this is the breaks, and this is the whole plot. We're going to run that. Yay! That's it. Not quite a wrap yet, but almost. That's great. So you see, this is really nice, and you could modify the colors in Illustrator. The only trouble is that sometimes you might not be able to keep track of all your hexadecimal values. So here, these all look to be the same value, so you could kind of do a batch change, but may not be so easy in some other times. Anyway, this is it, and again, this the labels here, the scale is correct, but the well, actually, this looks to be correct too. So I'm not sure. Maybe it happened only in a few cases that the text was being sorted. So we're going to fix this in Illustrator. We're going to make this line really clean, and we're going to do a lot of other things to make this beautiful. But now this is good, and we also have a key where our box for 100,000 is going to be very, very close. So let me just go back to the PDF. We'll look at the final version in Illustrator, and we call this done. So yeah, so I mean, again, I just replicated it. I put white lines between the different boxes, which I think is much nicer. I put a big, thick line, which sometimes will affect your boxes, but it's so minor that I don't think it's that important. Notice how the label for truck and cars, instead of being in the middle of the boxes, actually appear at the junction, right? Saying, okay, here's the separating point. These are cars, these are trucks. Yeah, I clean up my legend by putting, in this case, I put, I don't know, black lines because I think that gave me a chance to put a longer line here at this point that shows, below industry average and above industry average for that year. If I had done white, I would have been stuck here, right? Because I can't extend white onto the white of the paper. This is my key. So again, make sure you don't do a key that says, 105,325. That's no point in that. And just do a nice, maybe Helvetica regular for your labels. And don't forget to put the comma separator for thousands back in, because remember, our data don't have that, because otherwise you couldn't do it, right? Because comma is code. And sometimes you might need to change your labels to reverse to make it clear. And that's it. So thanks to Amanda Cox for her help in this.